So hi, and thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us. You know, we've already had a couple of people talk about the key role that MSMEs play. They contribute almost 30% currently to the nation's GDP and are also responsible for 110 million jobs, which is, of course, scaling up. We try to keep this as freewheeling as is possible. So, I will start with you, Girish. My first question to you, because a lot of conversations have taken place about how the pandemic has accelerated the digitization in the MSME space. Yet, many people believe there are hurdles that have also come. Not everyone has geared up in the same capacity. It's been in bursts and spurs. So, while MSMEs continue to be the backbone of the economy, like was mentioned earlier, in the growing digital economy, do you really think India is primed, India's MSME sector is truly primed to leverage digitization, especially in the tier 2 and the tier 3 cities?
Thank you. Just as a disclaimer, I come from an ITES sector. I'm a little biased in the way I answer this question because I think in India, you see the adoption rate is very high. It need not be digital, but it can be anything. The adoption rate is very high when there's an immediate impact to the businesses. So I think COVID definitely has accelerated that digitization. Tier 2, Tier 3 cities definitely adopted fintech to most part because obvious reasons for faster transactions, trying to get advantage of some of the schemes which are in fintech, which the government very wholeheartedly announced, many schemes for MSME sector. But on the same token, real digitization is when you actually go beyond just what we see as an immediate impact, but in the long run, would we actually have a model where the adoption of technology or adoption of digitization and embracing that and then continue to grow. If those steps are not in place, then it will be a point of time and what can be convenient to us, we will actually adopt. I'm sorry, but I just want to lay it out saying that there are many schemes which I've seen in MSME, but manufacturing has actually taken most of it. But then there are other sectors in services industry where we have not seen, even though the tools are available, the adoption rate is as per convenience.
So you do make a very valid point of, fintech has been the low-hanging fruit when it comes to digitization. And the continuum is something that, again, like I say, bursts and spurs. So Sandeep, if I were to ask you, do you think that, MSMEs are geared when it comes to, a long-term adoption, or is it that, like they just mentioned, FOMO is something that is driving them? Do they actually see the long-term benefits of digitization, or is there a certain amount of reluctance that is still there and they're just going because they don't want to miss out on the benefits it's likely to offer to them?
So thanks for having us here, first of all. We work with a lot of MSMEs and we are part manufacturing. MSME, if you see, there are 63 million MSMEs and 99% are micro. Actually, so it's a very, very small portion which falls under the mid and small segment who are kind of tech ready, you can say. Second part, if you look at the tech infrastructure which India has created, and a lot has happened in last 6-7 years, I would say. Platforms like UPI, ONDC, GEM portal, these are all targeted towards MSMEs, making the market accessible to them, making financing, TREDS platform, not to forget, the financing available to them. But they are addressing only the portion of the problem, right? So, for example, GEM, you can go and access the opportunities that are available to you. On TREDS, you can put your invoice and expect that you will get the payment early. But India is a very tough market. In order to complete a transaction, you have to go pretty much end to end. You will need a huge supply chain to make the ends meet. And you might have heard the interview of Uber's leader the other day, that India is a very, very demanding market where users demand a lot of stuff, but they don't want to pay, right? So the margins are also squeezed. You add more layers, MSME has to figure out where will they make the margins from. I think that's where the need is for creating more end-to-end platform which takes the MSME through the entire journey, not just addressing one portion of it. And given that a lot of them are micro, you will need more players, more end-to-end platforms which are addressing that portion. To some extent, we as Moglix, we are trying to play over there. We have basically created an entire supply chain. We have over 20,000 MSMEs who supply to us. And then through our warehouses, through our logistics network, we take their products to the end consumer. So if let's say a factory in Coimbatore is selling a product and there is an MSME sitting in Raniganj in Hyderabad who has that product, we can actually take it from him and send it to down south or Bhaddi in Himachal. So that's sort of breaking those boundaries. So while the MSME is ready, I think awareness is quite high. Everyone uses Google Pay or UPI and everything. People use e-commerce platform for B2C purpose. For an MSME to truly use it, I think a lot more end-to-end infrastructure needs to come in place.
So I agree with you. Christopher, I'm just going to come with you. And like you correctly mentioned, MSME by itself is quite an umbrella term, and when you slice and dice it, he correctly mentioned that, you have the micro and then you have the small and the medium. So maybe the medium players are the ones who are likelier to adopt digitalization faster. Do you actually see in your experience that the micro players are the ones who need to be prodded a lot and then a lot of hand holding has to be done to them for them to adopt digitization?
I completely kind of agree on that, Vinita, primarily for two reasons. One, even within the mid-segment, the numbers, the challenges about adoption for the ones who know. So there, a lot of people would want to go. For example, companies like us who are more oriented to people services and stuff like that, not very high on technology. The only thing is, with so many things available in the market, there's so much of trial and error that we need to go. So you see that so many people like us in the marketplace sometimes start off and then slow down, start off and slow down. Now that's one challenge. And so therefore, when I'm saying when it comes to the micro players, the education and the awareness and the hand holding is a big problem. So on one side, when everybody is so much aware because of so much of digital payments and life is full of digitization, but in spite of that, adoption coming on board, taking it forward is still a huge gap. There's still a huge gap.
Okay. So, Mr. Reddy, if I were to ask you, if you do concur with what Christopher says, how do you think can this gap be bridged?
I come from a little difficult industry. My customer walks in to buy an apartment, but I end up serving him for the next 5 years. So in our industry, it is, I think we are stuck somewhere with probably digitization meaning only a 3D model of a house or a 3D model of an apartment kind of a thing, especially in the MSME sector. The big boys have learned how to do it. I think there's a lot of reach, and I agree with Sir when he says that as in we are a service industry too, and we have a lot of tools to reach our customer, and we have failed to adopt a lot of them. And I do believe that whether a hand holding is required or not, it's a top-down effort. It's the top management that really has to gear itself up and decide that, put budget aside and make sure that the implementation of whether it is on the top line that you're trying to implement or trying to save your bottom line, uh, whichever is the implementation that you're trying to do, I think it's the management that matters, and it's always a top-down push. And somewhere, as being a legacy industry where, I think the father's business is generally taken over by the kids. Uh, so one of them has to be tech savvy. It's not an industry where we appoint CEOs and then things move on. It's an industry where land and development is more, uh, emotion is involved. So it's generally taken care within the family, and MSMEs, when the family gets involved, somebody has to be tech savvy for this to push forward. I feel that's a big space where mindset is a issue, if you ask me.
So earlier, just before our session, I was having a chat with Mahesh, and we were actually talking about that, the digital reluctance that is there, the mindset. And for some reason, that seems to be one of the biggest hurdles that exist when it comes to adoption for digital products. What is your take, Mahesh, about this?
Yeah, good evening. Am I audible? Yeah. Got used to doing that, right? So many Teams calls. Yeah. So I come from a context of retail, right? And we do up homes. After probably apartments are sold, we end up helping people to do up the homes. So in that pursuit, we are in touch with so many companies who make those nice little vases, the rugs, that corner piece that goes in and so on. Jaipur, Jodhpur, Saranpur, Moradabad, down south, a lot of places. The biggest, and in fact, we were trying to do an entire Discover India kind of campaign and wanted to bring the talent and bring the art and artisanship of these people to the fore. And like I said before, one of the biggest things that we observed was that they're very good at what they are good at, which is primarily manufacturing, production. The balance part of it, the entire packaging, barcoding, sending it for organized retail, was something that was missing. And when we actually met a lot of these owners and spoke to them, they said, we are good at what we are and let us be there. So the reluctance to probably get themselves onboarded with the latest in tech or the latest in the way the retail systems work was challenging. So why this mindset issue is there is what I've been wondering, and in fact I've said that more corporates need to probably come together and work on actually only mindset management. So the rest of things will fall in place. There's enough tech available, there's enough service providers out there who can help us. But if, like what he said, if there's a legacy issue that's being carried on, for sure somebody in that family, largely these are family run business, has to be able to go beyond the mobile and using the mobile for basic stuff and actually try to get into absorbing tech. So for me, absorbing tech is the first part before adopting tech. So and I think there's a lot that needs to be done on the mindset. I'm sure some of us are trying to do it, but we have our own pressures. We have, our quarters to match. So when that happens, this probably sometimes take a backseat, and we'll have to admit that. So I guess if more of us come together and actually, I don't know, I'm not talking government, I'm not talking, I would say NGOs to help us. But I'm saying corporates, if they can come together and actually create a platform for working on mindsets, I think that's going to be a big, big thing, and it's going to be generational. So we'll have to work on generation 1, 2, and 3, and probably hope that second and third sort of start absorbing it first, then get into adoption.
So Girish, if you were to labor on that, and like you mentioned, you come from the ITES background, the creation of such a platform is something that, of course, it would help. But do you really think that corporates would want to spend that much time, that much efforts, with no clear vision on, whether they are going to get any kind of returns? Do you think that they will then still want to invest into such an initiative?
I think corporates obviously are not doing anything for charity to start with. Obviously, there is a CSR portion to it. We would definitely want to be part of the initiative. In fact, if you really look at how the adoption, which Mahesh just spoke about, right? There's a very standard term called change management in our language. It's just not about micro or small or medium, and what you originally asked about tier 2, tier 3 cities, right? it is all about that making sure that the change management process is in place. Because if you really look at how government is enabling all of these sub-large industries, whether it's micro to medium, there are a lot of tools out there for you to go and explore and try and get benefit. But there's no standard operating procedure for you to define these are the steps you need to follow to get to that point. Nobody in that industry, which is regulated, unregulated, and somewhat distributed, family owned, you wouldn't know where to start this. And what is for me to go from point A to point B, what are the steps I need to do? This change management or standard operating procedures are not in place for adoption. Again, I strongly believe, I think we are all talking the same thing, especially in India. I think we can talk how digital revolution happened across the country. It's just not about tier 1, tier 2. And when industrial revolution, we missed out on that. When mobile revolution happened, I think we were 10 steps ahead of everybody adopting mobile to just do our everyday life, right? And the chores which we were doing, this mobile was good enough for us. And now with payment platforms and e-commerce and transacting, it's become so second nature for everyone, just not in cities. It's just in tier 2, tier 3, right? So everywhere you have a QR code, you can scan. So it is, I think we are blessed with a way we can get things done. If we can get things done fast, we will adopt it. Language is not a barrier. Technology is not a barrier. Are we as a country have the right way of training, adopting, and making sure that it is all pervasive across the landscape, right? So, and this is where I think for all the effort the private public sector is putting in, you should bring in corporates. And corporates are best because obviously there's while the government has schemes, we should always have VCs and PEs also invest so that there's a discipline in terms of how these schemes are being adopted and also funded, right? So all the digitization which is coming along, there's a tools, technology, and processes. And more importantly in India, it is the people who matter out of all of other areas, right? So that's what we think, and I'm pretty sure it's on its way. It's just that we need to have some checks and balances in place.
Checks and balances is something that we need every time, across every process. But Sandeep, since you work with a lot of MSMEs, right? Have you actually been, or has Moglis actually initiated any kind of change management to change the mindsets of the people that you work with, make them more amenable when it comes to digitization? Can you just give us insight into that?
So if you look at MSMEs, when we started working with them, there are three parts to your business. You need a marketing and sales engine. You need the order processing engine. And then you need the financing and payment engine. For most of these MSMEs, including the mid and small ones, leaving micros aside, for them the marketing engine was Facebook and Instagram. For them the order processing engine was WhatsApp. And for them payment was UPI. Right? That's the digital footprint for them. And then you want them to graduate to a more formal order processing system. And I think the point you mentioned, I don't know how many of you realize, India pretty much skipped the age of landline. From no phone, we practically went directly to mobile phones, right? Because it was very, very easy to use, and then cost effective. Moment it became cost effective, people adopted. Some of the things we are trying to do is by learning from this aspect, that if it is easy to use and it's cost effective, MSME is going to jump on it. Right? If it is complicated, if the information is not available on how to use it, it becomes difficult. So few of the things we do, in fact, a large part of our team spends time in the market with these guys to see how they are doing their day-to-day business. And then can we provide them applications which will help them conduct the business in an easy manner. So just to put it simply, we are trying to build parallels of Instagram, WhatsApp, and UPI for them, where they can do marketing, they can do order processing, and they can do payments part. And that you really have to sit down with them and then understand and then build those things. So those are some of the ground initiatives happening. In fact, I'll probably just 30 seconds mention a quick story. We were in Varanasi about 2 weeks back, and we took a guided tour. And the guy said when Tulsidas wrote Ramcharitmanas, no one read it for 6-8 months. He went out and realized no one is reading it. And then he thought what I should be doing to ensure that people read. I've written such a lovely book, spent so many years on it. He got an idea of doing Ram Leelas. So he said, people are not going to read it on their own. I have to go enact, show them the story, tell them the story, and then they will come back and start reading the book. So he went across the country, conducted Ram Leelas, telling the story, and then the book became popular. So I think that's what it is with all these platforms. We have created the Ramcharitmanas of MSME digital platform. Someone has to do the Ram Leela bit to ensure they know how to use it.
So, you seem to be joining the leagues of Mark Zuckerberg, who also wanted to have a super app. Elon Musk also mentioned about the fact that he wanted to have a super app which, combines the strength of everything. But coming to you, Christopher, you also you mentioned that, there has been stages when you adopted some of the technologies and then, kind of let it run by the wayside, and some of them were not. Now, there is this very interesting, survey that I was reading, which said that, the digital transformation of MSMEs requires adoption that goes beyond digitizing accounting and analyzing to using relevant data, so that it can positively influence business operations. What Sandeep said is also the same thing. So he's also talking about how to have a Ram Leela kind of a thing when it comes to digitization. In your case, what actually was the reason that you guys decided, okay, we tried this for some time, we let it go, let's pick it up again, let it go? Was it because you did not see any positive business outcome? Was it because you had a problem with manpower? Was it, you just got blindsided by something else?
Yeah, that's a great question, and kind of one of the insights and realization is this, that when companies like us, where we slowed down, what happened when I kind of look back, we see that you look at the opportunity to digitize, you kind of look at going and either getting a product or somebody to do a product for you to solve your problems. But you actually don't set aside a budget and a time. And I think Sandeep was talking about, not Sandeep, you were talking about change management plan. So kind of structured, breaking it down to small bite-sized modules to be taken in, and enough of time and money budgeted to train, to internalize. If that kind of a forethought and foresight is not there, so you kind of tend to take up something and just hit roadblocks very soon. That was our experience. And now that we are kind of again getting back, we kind of correcting the course there and say this is how we'll approach. We'll kind of get into breaking down as small as the processes to solve, take it, internalize it, and build it. But we also have seen one of our largest clients is one of the largest retailers in the country, who have a huge footprint, and one of the digitizing challenges that's been going on is about the manpower. Lakhs and lakhs of manpower working across the country to digitize their attendance. It's about a year and a half, that problem is not solved. They're still struggling, primarily because of this. They came up with a beautiful program and thing, but to be able to internalize at the blue-collar people level, it's stuck for a long while. So therefore, training that budget for training and time and taking it in a structured way is absolutely critical, is what I feel.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now that you're restarting, I would say, your digital transformation journey, what is the first thing that you're going to pick on, and how are you going to ensure that you're going straight through this time?
This time we're doing something different and a little more interesting. Is our partner has been that way a little creative when we shared that this is what happened in the past, and therefore whatever we want to do, we really want to do it with much more deeper sense of thought. So what we did is, what they came up with is, they said, why don't we involve all the stakeholders, including the guys who are going to use it. And so we did that along with a design thinking, methodology to get all the ground level crew and quite a few representatives there. And the insights that came up were so very different than had just the top senior leaders would sit and come up with in the way that they would want to approach, solve the problem. It was completely different. So therefore, that's the first lesson. And the second lesson is this, that, like I said, take bite-sized issues to solve and then go, and that goes a long way. So that's what we're doing now.
Okay. So, Mr. Reddy, I'm going to come to you because, like he also mentioned and Sandeep also pointed out, people seem to be at the crux, when it comes to digital transformation. And in real estate, that is also one of the biggest component that is there. He mentioned about the fact that, attendance management is a huge lacune that is there. So in the real estate, when it comes to digital transformation, what are the processes that can actually work, that have worked and will have not been as successful from your experience?
I've not ever faced an issue with adoption of what is built already. So I've done Salesforce and SAP implementations, and none of both of them I did twice. So none of it I did once. It never worked the first time. So best of luck to you, by the way. So what really happens is it's not just the your team or your employees that is important. It's your implementation partners too. MSMEs generally face a problem. Uh, the half of India's IT service industry is supporting the Europe, the US, the Australia. The budgets are unimaginable. The IT budgets of those companies are unimaginable. And you are trying to go to a similar company and trying to get your software implemented. And there, you're probably the third priority. So you do not expect an implementation partner to put the best of their team on you. So first you start with that mindset. It's not going to happen. And so you have to figure out a way to have some knowledge yourself before you get into it. And that really helped me. Our team, we try to understand what that process is via sometimes taking YouTube video tutoring and then talking to our consultant. Because half of the time, the system would actually be there in the software that is being presented, but the implementation partner would not know about it, and he would say it will call for a customization and give you a heavy bill. So it does happen a lot of times. I see him smirking, but that's true. And that's true, and that's something that I faced. So you need to know what's there in the system first. And that's very important, and nobody can help you. You have to get into it. You have to get your hands muddy. That's the only way forward.
So you said that you did Salesforce and SAP twice. How dirty did you get your hands? You said YouTube tutorials, but now how deeply involved are you? How well educated are you with how the processes and the CRM and ERP work?
Uh, I can't start an IT services company, but I'm just short of that. So I did have to. I mean, I think while SAP was being implemented, I think the number of hours that I spent on YouTube uh, it was insane. I didn't study for my exams like that. So, just to say that.
Somehow the MSME has turned the fingers on us. I'm sitting in the middle of all of this stuff and hearing IT services being blamed for a lot of stuff. But I hear you. Actually, I think it's a big, I think the way you have to look at it is we started, IT services in India started for exports more than internal consumption. and sometimes you get into that mix of what is my best return on investment. Um, and then there is a subtle thing that when you work with Indians, there is always that subtle thing of saying that I know what you get and how much you make. So there's that one-upmanship in terms of negotiation, right, which we can't win with our Indian customers. So I hear your pain, and I also would say that I think having to know a little bit more about the software is always helps. Sometimes it doesn't help because the customer sometimes knows a lot more, and it's always difficult to convince that what you're doing is the optimum thing, right? So I think we feel that in terms of adoption, in terms of where we are in that particular segment, I think we strongly believe that tools, technologies, everything else is a medium than actually the way of means to an end, because I think with all our experiences, collective experiences, we feel that either it's micro or small or medium, I think if there's a right incentive for somebody to pick it up, and that is very, very specific to each individual businesses, and I think we will never be short of adoption. It's all about hand-holding where needed, and actually somebody was mentioning, Sandeep was mentioning that there's a lot of areas where we can improve, and you asked the earlier question where corporates can help. Corporates can help bring the discipline of actually segmenting the problem into those segments where you can address them, right? If it is marketing, what are the tools available for marketing? How do you go to market with those tools? Then if it is supply chain, then you know how transparent the process should be in terms of supply chain to understand your inventory, understand where the purchasing cycle is. Again, I'm always surprised that when 30% of GDP is there and 50% of exports are coming from MSME, I'm pretty sure they're doing something right. But only thing we need to figure out is which segments within a MSME are really adopting and which are not paying that much attention, right? So I think that problem we need to solve. It's a combined number of 30%, but we don't know within that is manufacturing taking the most of it, or is it because service industry is negligible in terms of that segment, I feel.
So I will now direct it to Mahesh, because you are a B2B to C company, right? So he mentioned about the service industry. So while you're a product company and you're also a service company, combined together, do you think there has, legacy systems also have a play when it comes to, acting as a hurdle when it comes to digital transformation? Because the MSMEs, they might be starting with a clean slate, but your suppliers or your vendors, they might have some legacy systems, and there is not a very good cohesion that is there. Have you ever experienced that?
No, I think I'll answer this slightly differently rather than looking at the challenges that a B2BC or a B2C company. Let's look at what's happening now. We have this whole phenomenon called D2C happening, right? Direct to consumer. And that's largely led by the entire digitalization efforts that are on. And this whole trend of smaller and closer. So customers are wanting their suppliers and their service providers to be closer to them, and also are expecting them to be smaller in terms of maybe their size, because they feel that there will be a lot more comfort. So the rise of D2C, the direct to consumer in India without the middlemen, is driven by MSMEs. So they are the engines for D2C growth. And so they are picking up. I mean, on one hand, you have the digitally reluctant people. In the equal breath, I'll also say there's a whole bunch of digitally enthusiastic MSMEs who are out there. And these are people who are willing to absorb and also implement processes that will ensure that they are able to deliver the right product at the right time, at the right price, directly to the consumer, cutting off the middleman, right? It's a huge revolution that's happening silently. And I think a lot more investments are also happening in D2C, as we see. Plenty of roll-up commerce is also happening. So I think rather than looking at what legacy systems are probably pushing larger corporates, maybe larger corporates need to be looking at these D2C enterprises and seeing what are those guys doing right? What are those family-owned small, micro-small companies doing right that they're able to, I know of companies who do 1,000 transactions a day. 1,000 transactions a day, if they're able to produce, pack, ship, deliver, get their ratings, and see to it that they continue it consistently. It's not an easy job. So if they're doing that, then I think larger corporates should be able to learn from them and see what they're doing right, and probably flip our larger, I would say, SOPs and all that closer to what those guys are doing. So that's my take on it.
Okay. Sandeep, I'm going to just ask you about this. When you talked about 1,000 transactions, okay, we're seeing that across various verticals. You have D2C, you also have in manufacturing. Certainly you've seen that a lot more uptick is there in numbers of orders that are being processed. You feel that somewhere cyber security could also be, I wouldn't say a hurdle, but something that is there at the back of the mind of most of the MSMEs, thinking that, okay, with the amount of cyber frauds that are taking place, if I go ahead and implement some of the solutions that are there, I might be opening myself to some kind of a ransomware or any kind of a cyber security threat. That could also be the reason they are withholding going all out when it comes to digitization.
See, the threat is real. Cyber security is a big concern. In fact, people are saying that there are 3 types of powers which are evolving. There is a defense power, there is a economic power, and there is digital power. And the wars will be fought in all 3 areas in its own manner. There will be clear wars, there will be economic wars, there will be digital wars. Cyber security is the digital war form. I think MSMEs are a bit far from realizing that there is a cyber security threat. I think for them, first step will be to start using the digital platform, what we were talking about. Data sensitivity, etc. in India is still at a very low maturity stage. In fact, many of the large companies don't understand the criticality. MSMEs will probably be next in the queue. So I would say the threat is real, but I don't think they understand or they are at a point where they'll start to take measures to do anything on the data security front. It'll have to be taken care of at the platforms level. So whatever, whether a public sector or a private sector company, whoever is providing the infra, it'll have to be handled at that level. I don't think MSME in near future will worry about cyber security part.
Okay, but given the fact, and he just mentioned about the fact that he got his hands dirty with 2 of the top well-known IT companies. However, currently there are a lot of smaller vendors, and MSMEs more or less gravitate towards them because, like you said, they will look at आप कितना बना रहे हो, आप इसमें कितना margin ले रहे हो, मेरे को उसमें से कितना benefit होगा, and all of that stuff. Those platforms might not have those security protocols very well embedded. Do you think MSMEs are aware, or maybe they might be aware, and therefore they also think that, okay, let me not get into that thing because I will be opening up another door, another Pandora's box, which is best kept shut?
See, I think brand plays a role over there. Like if they know that the application is hosted on Azure or AWS, Amazon Web Services, they have that comfort in mind that, okay, the company is running which understands. So I think cloud has played a big role to give that piece. There are no boxes sitting in your office where people worry about that there will be an attack and all. I don't think awareness is to that extent where they are aware that what am I protected against, what am I not, but they just go with, okay, this is a well-known brand, well-known platform, and my data, etc. will be taken care of. But I would say still on a scale of 10, if you ask me, it will be probably 2 or 3 as the maturity level, or even for that matter, how much they care about it right now. It's much more about business, that dhanda milega ki nahi, that's what it is ultimately.
And that's a conversation that you guys also try and enforce when, like you said, you went about doing the Ramlila kind of anecdote.
When we go to these guys, see, it's not, I think more than cyber security, our conversation is more around the governance and compliances part. Somewhere the cyber security part is implied that it will be taken care of. So when we go and engage with them, it's much more about that, around the GST part or other compliances part or MSME payments part, how those will be taken care of and they don't need to worry about that. And I think that matters the most to them. It's not so much on the ground. I don't think with MSMEs we are engaging in conversations. We are educating them about cyber threat or data security and stuff as yet.
Okay. So, Christopher, I want to ask you one question. Access to capital is something that has always been a very crucial point for most of the MSMEs. So, they are very mindful about how they allocate the monies that they have across various buckets. Do you think, not having adequate funding could be one of the reasons that, MSMEs might put off their decision for digitization? And do you think that, government funding or, having some kind of an access from the government would actually accelerate this adoption?
Absolutely, Vinita, because most of, like when we're looking at subsectors, we heard that you have a lot of micro companies and quite a few medium companies. Um, First of all, that awareness is not there right at the beginning itself. So that's number one is awareness. Number two is the allocation, therefore the allocation of funds, saying that this is a must and should. And then the availability of funds. And say, for example, something that really helped the MSME sector was the MSME funds the government had given. Similarly, it kind of boosted it big time in the last couple of decades. So therefore something towards these two will definitely accelerate. That because along with those funds availability will also come certain guidelines and processes and also awareness. That itself will come together and create an ecosystem for the MSMEs and more so for the micro companies to kind of latch onto this and go forward more openly and more fearlessly.
Got it.
Yes.
What about you, Mahesh? Do you also agree with that?
See, I think anytime, any form of government support is always welcome, especially for helping the MSMEs to improve their digitalization journey. But I think for most of them, even today, their first, I don't think access to market is a challenge for them, and they're able to get, I think the demand side is more or less taken care of. And like you rightly said, if 50% of the exports are happening from India, they're getting something very right. So I think they've got quite a bit of the demand side equation right. And on the supply side, I think the manufacturing is something that they're already, that's their, I would say, it runs in their DNA. Where they, what's different for them is, on not running their DNA is the digitalization. So I think far more funds probably being set up. Again, I go back to this, I know I'm very fond of saying that corporates probably need to get together and not do it as charity and also not do it as part of CSR, but actually create some kind of an ecosystem where you can nurture MSMEs and their specific funding towards specifically digitalization. And if that kind of an ecosystem is sort of formulated and I would say incubated, maybe next 5-10 years from now we'll probably not be talking about do we need to digitalize, but maybe the next orbit. So that's my take on it.
Okay, and you, Mr. Reddy, what do you have to say?
Giving money to a builder will buy land. Very frankly. So the drive should not come from the end user. The problem is like Mr. Girish, he mentioned that it was an export-based economy. IT was an export-based economy that created jobs in the first place, which now we are discussing about Indian mid-income companies trying to implement such valiant technologies, right? So there was a scheme called Arogyasri, it's still there I think in Telangana, right? Where you treat a patient, government will subsidize you. That is to the hospital. They should become the channels. They should be subsidized or compensated if they implement enough technology in Indian companies. And there should be a way and mechanism to do that. Like I said, I mean, every business has pressure, and you give money to that business, they're going to figure out a way on how to, probably buy raw material. So I think it's that way is a better way. So companies should prioritize in terms of implementing, IT companies should prioritize in terms of implementing technologies for MSMEs, and they should put the right kind of resources, they should do all of that. They will do all of that provided they are adequately compensated. The issue is today that, you cannot be a large scale ITS company serving only Indian clients. It's just not possible. And so you have to have at least 50% of your revenue coming from out of state, out of country, which actually means that you are a second priority no matter what. So that's where I think the solution lies.
So what is your recommendation to make it actually from a second priority to maybe somewhere up there in the top priority?
So let's say I implement certain technologies, and I spend about, and I'm enticed to spend from the IT service company about 1 crore of bill of implementing these technologies. I can't spend 1 crore because I'm an MSME, let's say. For implementing this particular processes in my company, government should subsidize that ITS company at least 50% of the amount. And so there will be a drive from the IT service companies to implement technologies in MSMEs. So they will train them, they will educate them, then they will service them appropriately. They will do all of that. And that whole necessity of the ecosystem to be understood by the MSME is required. It's not just that, I want to do X, Y, Z. It's not that. It becomes a responsibility of the IT services company to tell you that your business is X, Y, Z, and you probably start at X, next year you do Y, and next year and one other thing, this is not, one shop for all kind of a solution. You just go and buy something and put it in your office and say, I'm fully digitized. Every year is going to pose a different challenge. So you need to continuously adapt to the new phases of challenges that your business is going to throw. So that's where I think it is.
So Girish, I'm going to throw this at you. Do you think this is something that is viable, or is it something that, and scalable?
Yeah, thank you for taking up our cause here. One thing actually we have not touched upon, again, trying to go from a corporate to all the way to a micro business. The trust factor is a big thing, right? So I think, which we haven't talked about much, if I go as a corporate to any tier 2, tier 3 city and try and showcase an option, I'm not sure the adoption or even encouraging a solution to be implemented will be seen with the same set of eyes if I was going along with an NGO or with a government funded scheme. Because we tried a couple of things. As an example, we built an app for way back, about a few years back. If there were some accidents and then somebody needed blood, it was very difficult for people to find out that blood group of a person and so on and so forth. We built an app for quickly identifying people around within that blood group who are registered donors and so on and so forth. And we built it with painstakingly trying to get every nuance identified. And then we tried actually distributing it. But then there was always a trust factor which they didn't want to register, they didn't want to put in details because there was a corporate tag behind me. And of course, even though the data is still not all that critical in terms of privacy and so on here, but still there was an iota of doubt. But a few years later, when we did a virtual care, when obviously prior to COVID, when we tied up with the hospital and built a virtual care platform where it's completely digitized, where you can, like now it is a common theme, but we have built it for the biggest hospital here in India, where your pharmacy, your home care, your diagnostics, and whatnot, right? Your virtual consultations, all are taken care on the platform. But if it was launched with a lot of fanfare, with government getting involved, and a big known corporate is involved, and the adoption is much more faster. The trust is established instantaneously. The small companies have a lot of technical skills and they can build very agile, but just trying to reach the market and trying to get to the lowest common denominator is always going to be difficult here. So there should be some bridge. As a corporate, we are willing to extend the hand, but it has to have a lot more barriers to cross, and we need a lot more support to reach the end user.
So looks like, there is a lot of conversations that can be done about the need for initiative, the need for collaboration, and how everyone can come together to ensure that the digitization that has already started is augmented and takes off even more rapidly. Thank you, gentlemen. This is all the time that we have, and I'm sure a lot of people from the audience would have questions. I would request you to probably take it offline so that we can stick to the timelines of the event. Thank you. It was a great pleasure having a conversation with you guys.